What is it going to take to create peace on Earth? And what do people in the afterlife have to say about what is happening on planet Earth and how humanity interacts with each other? We're going to find out that and more today on Accentuate the Positive Media with Karen Swain with the gorgeous Barbara Witt. Stay tuned.
You got to accentuate the positive. I feel good. A little bit of feel good goes a long way.
You're listening to Karen Swain, teacher of deliberate creation, accentuating the positive, showing you a way to a better life.
Accentuating the positive, it's not just fad, it's sanity. Who in their right mind would accentuate anything else?
If you feel like that's what you want to do.
G'day. Welcome to another show, Accentuating the Positive with Karen Swain on the United Public Radio Network and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network on 107.7 and 105.3 FM, syndicated radio streaming all across the United States and Canada. And of course, we are also streaming on several platforms, YouTube, Facebook, Rumble, and Odyssey today, as well as Twitch. Well, I've got an amazing woman to introduce you all to. Maybe many of you have heard of her already, the wonderful Barbara Witt. Welcome to the show, Barbara.
Oh, Karen, thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to our chat.
Look, there's a lot to chat about. As I said in the intro, what is it going to take to create peace on Earth? It's something I've been thinking about for a long time. And as we watch the news unfold across the nation, it doesn't look like it's happening anytime soon. So what is it going to take to create peace on Earth? And what are the people in spirit who have led lives, extraordinary lives on Earth, have to say about it? Let me tell you a little bit about Barbara. So Barbara Witt is an international peace activist, award-winning author, publisher, psychic channel, composer, performer, workshop facilitator, and inspirational speaker. She is the co-founder of Conflict Revolution, a revolutionary way to resolve conflict of the psyche based on her work channeling Albert Einstein. Barbara has been with a group who call themselves The Party, headed by Albert Einstein, for years. It started years ago, since 1987, right, Barbara?
I've been channeling since 1987. Yes.
Divinely guided to become the emissary of this group of dedicated souls working in the afterlife for world peace, one person at a time, starting with yourself. In 1993, Barbara and her associates, the Psychic Sorority, I love that name, the Psychic Sorority, were recruited to test a revolutionary process Einstein said would resolve conflict of the psyche as a pathway to global peace. This is the conflict revolution, and Barbara has been teaching it and training this since 1999. But in 2023, Barbara started a world peace tour looking for participants of the willing to take part in a worldwide non-violent action to end the age of war, causing conflict revolution, she has traveled to over, it says here you've traveled over 23,000 miles since then, talking and inspiring peace. And your website, you've got 6 books, which we'll talk about a bit later, but it's synergyalliance.llc. That's a new one, LLC. What's
Yes.
LLC stand for?
Limited Liability Corporation.
Wow, I haven't seen that one before. Limited Liability Corporation. Let's see who's online. Thank you so much. How do I pronounce that name? Alexandra.
Alexandra.
Alexandra. Yeah, thank you. Well, let's get into it. Yeah, you've been doing this for a long time, and it's fascinating to hear about our non-physical counterparts, how they're still very engaged in the Earth story. And Albert Einstein, who is still talked about all the time, all over the world, is here
Mhm.
is here helping us from his home, his neighborhood in another dimension. So how did it all start for you, Barbara? How did this mandate to travel the world teaching peace start?
It actually started many years ago, decades ago, when I became a songwriter. I started writing music when I was very young, when I was 12, and it was my passion. And the act of writing music is very much like channeling, where you go into the non-physical and you listen and you
Yeah.
bring back ideas and into melodies and rhythms and lyrics and such. I started channeling in 1987, and then I started doing these groups with my group, my new group at that time, the Psychic Sorority, in 1993. And when I started getting readings with my mentor, Eunice, she was an antenna. So there wasn't angels or dead people or souls or anything. It was just we were antennas. And when I started working in the group, the girls asked, "Well, who are you? We need to know who you are." And they said, "Well, you can call us angels at first." That's what they told us. And I'm a
Interesting.
very skeptical person. I encourage everyone to practice really healthy skepticism because
Mhm.
I think the truth outlives the skepticism, and it's really needed, especially in this day and age. But we decided that as long as what they were telling us was as divine and regenerative to us as it was, that we didn't care if it was the Easter Bunny. It was changing our lives dramatically.
Uh-huh.
And we put out our first book in 1997, Diaries of a Psychic Sorority, Talking with the Angels. And it's our actual diaries of meeting each other, because I did not know these women before we started doing this. And these angels, as you mentioned, came in and said, "We've got this revolutionary process about how to resolve conflicts in such a way that the byproduct will be world peace. And we need actual humans with actual conflicts to test this theory on." And
Yeah.
I had never I would never have imagined such a thing when I started channeling groups. I thought, well, what would these voices say? But sure enough, they had this process, and we had the conflicts. 3 women have conflicts, and we painstakingly began the journey of research and development using their information that was brilliant, and unfolded what turned out to be conflict revolution, just a really revolutionary approach to conflict. Now I don't know if I still think it's revolutionary, but back in the 90s when you were telling people to turn inward and look inward and find their conflicts inward first, it was kind of uh, questionable to kind of the mainstream. It sounded like victim blaming, I think. But um, as we worked the process and found out how amazing it worked when we resolved these conflicts as they told us inside, and then around us, things would naturally change. We wouldn't have to go at it at the arena in which it was playing out. So that was very profound. And I started training it actually in a nonprofit, women's empowerment nonprofit in St. Paul as a staff development. And then I was teaching it to women with jobs in the trades as anger management and as manifestation. And so it's really had a lot of research and development through the years.
Wow. Absolutely amazing. I'm thinking about the conflicts in the Middle East. I watched a documentary last night on the Prince of Saudi Arabia, which was really fascinating. And sure, there's still a lot of conflict in the West. In our personal relationships, everyone's hating somebody. Everyone's
Mhm.
got their story about somebody, whether it's a politician or their ex or their family member. Everyone, but yeah. How do we get this across the world, Barbara? How do we get it across the world so that countries stopped fighting each other? How do we do that?
Well,
Anyway.
in this work, when after we published our book, Diaries, and a year later, I was contacted by a paranormal tabloid in London wanting an interview with Princess Diana from Beyond the Grave on the 1-year anniversary of her death. And again, I was skeptical because I'd never done that before. I could communicate with those who'd passed on, but they'd always come to me. So I did it. I channeled this interview. I typed it and channeled both the questions and the answers. And when I read it back afterwards, I just wept. And her whole message was about if everybody who put flowers on the palace gate after I died would do this process, we would have world peace. So her whole message, not her whole message, but that was the gist of why she came to inspire us to make peace. And the tabloid didn't want it. But my agent and I were like, well, maybe there's other famous people who want to talk. So I made this whole list. And guess what? Einstein wasn't on it. He wasn't on it. So I started doing these interviews with people, and I'd go to some, Gandhi or Elvis, and they didn't want it, but people would step up. The souls would step up. And I didn't know who was going to until I asked. But when we got to John Kennedy, which was each one of these interviews totally blew my mind because I didn't know anything about these people, not to the depth to which they were telling us. But he said to us, look, put your list away. We're going to tell you who's coming up because we're a group who have already been working in afterlife for peace. And we want you to get our message out there. And so when Einstein came up, so this is 1998, and I started channeling in 1987. And when Einstein came up in the queue and I channeled him, I spoke, I didn't write. It was the voice of every single one of my readings. Everyone.
Wow. Mm.
And it took me a long time, well, relative, but it took me several years to really accept and integrate this possibility because, I knew my voice. I know my voice. And I knew that energy. And I knew that energy was there when I first started channeling. I knew that energy was there in the music I was making when I was very young.
Mm.
But my intellect was like, really? Really?
Yeah.
Are you going to tell people? So I hid behind the angels for a while. But when Party of 12 came out, it was June of 2001. So it was only a few months later when 9/11 happened. And then I thought, you know what? I really have to take this risk because this information with all these people, it's all about how to make peace. It's all about us committing to peace. It's all about how their lives were impacted. For example, Nicole Brown Simpson. There's a woman who was basically murdered by her husband and had to leave her kids behind with the murderer. And she was struggling to find peace. And Anwar Sadat, who was assassinated, actually, for making peace. So all of these people in real life had been peacemakers and left the planet with this imprint of, especially Einstein, how are we going to make peace? He was obsessed with it in his life, and he brought it in with him to afterlife. And I guess I volunteered and was chosen to be his emissary.
Yeah, I think that, I think there's probably quite a few people on the planet, being inspired by people like that who had physical lives, who are continuing their work from the other side. The Party of 12. But I'd like to get into, because they identified, you've said a few names, but the Party of 12 was originally the Party of 12. Barbara and I were talking about this before we went live. I reverently called my guides the mob. Because when I asked them who they were, they laughed at me. They thought that was the most hilarious, a question. And they said, you can't imagine how many different identities we've been, both on this planet and on other planets. Who do you want us to be? Pick one.
How can we tell you?
How could we tell you? It's too many numbers. But but we do identify as humans, with identity, with names and people's stories. So Einstein's one of them. Anna Nicole Smith is another one. What was the identities they gave you, the Party of 12?
Well, there was Diana And then
It's a
Gianni
shame.
Versace, he too had just been,
Versace. Oh, interesting.
and he gave this incredible dissertation about culture and how, all of these people who are in modeling are sort of considered degenerates. A lot of people,
Mhm.
especially at that time, were using drugs, and there was sort of this culture, and yet elevating them in culture to these are our role models. So he went into
Right.
a really incredible dissertation about that. And then
Wow. Mm.
JFK and Jackie O,
JFK and Jackie.
yes,
Right. Mhm.
and Norma Jean Baker. So
Ah, Norma Jean Baker.
that was an interesting
Yeah.
association between
Wow.
them. And a young man named Ryan White. I don't know if people remember who he was, but he was a young man who was one of the first people to get AIDS through blood transfusions.
Oh.
He died young of AIDS. And oddly enough, he and Johnny Versace and Diana were all very close to Elton John.
Mhm.
So the book was dedicated to him, and they actually say some personal things to him. I've tried to get him the book, but I don't know if he's ever received it. But also Anwar Sadat, Jesus of Nazareth, has a beautiful, beautiful dissertation. Sigmund Freud, and he was able to sort of set the record straight for some misconceptions that he did in life with his assumptions about various things. Adolf Hitler. We talked to Adolf Hitler,
Wow.
and that
Mhm.
was also absolutely fascinating. And he confirmed what I've always believed is that you don't go to hell. Hell comes out of you based on the energy that you put into life and then take with you into afterlife. And so there wasn't any people were like, "Oh my God, you could, get sucked into his evil vortex." It's like, no, no.
Mm.
And oddly enough, that was 1998, and as time has passed, it was in the beginning when I did it, people were like, "What? You're talking to Hitler, these aren't angels." Kind of like that.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And now, because we throw that name around like it's nothing, every time you don't like some political figure, you call them Hitler. Well, he had a
Yeah.
lot of wise things to tell us in that interview. And one of them was, why channel Hitler? And his answer was, so I can tell you firsthand that if you think you're going to, meet 42 Vestal virgins after you massacre a bunch of people, yeah, you'll be there for a tiny bit, but then quickly the energy will take you to a different place, and everybody has to bear their own responsibility of consequences for their actions. Everybody.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was really interesting. And then I had the interviews done in a month, and and that was 98, and I didn't publish it until in 1999, John Kennedy Jr. died. And he appeared before me and my agent at the time. She called me up out of the blue and said, "Hey, I just got a visit from John Jr. and he wants to do the intro of the book." And so we sat down in early 2000 in the shadow of the state capitol of Wisconsin one winter night and channeled JJ Jr. and John Kennedy Jr. Beautiful, beautiful message. And at the end, in this book, there's a manifesto of the destiny of peace. And it's a promise, it's a commitment that all of these souls and myself and you, if you'd like, can sign, saying that we are not going to stop life after life, soul after soul. Everything that we have to do, whether it's with our own selves, to our family, to our community, to our state, to our country, to the energy, to the global world, to everyone else on everybody, all the other planets, we are not going to stop until we have manifest peace in the physical world. And
So world peace, like not just but world peace.
Yes.
Which book is this that you're talking about that
Party
has
of
all
12. The afterlife, the
Ah.
maroon one that looks like
the
Catcher
maroon
in the
one, the
Rye.
Party of 12, the afterlife interviews.
Yes.
I'll have to read that. I haven't read
Yes.
I haven't read any of these books, but yeah, so let's go through a couple of it. So you've got Imagining Einstein, Essays on M Theory, World Peace, and the Science of Compassion, Diaries, as you mentioned, Diaries of Psychic Sorority. That's talking with the angels. Is that the first book that came out?
Yes,
Diaries
that
with
was
the
the
Psychic
first one.
Sorority. The Psychic Sorority. That is the best name. I love that.
It
Party of
is.
12. Einstein et al. This is so great. Einstein et al. Et al. Is and the rest.
Yeah,
all the
everybody
rest.
else.
And everybody else.
It's a
I
big
often
party
use
now.
et al. And Party of 12 post 9/11 and Conflict Revolution, World Peace, one person at a time, starting with you. That's the handbook, isn't it? That one there.
Yeah, it's a little workbook if you want to get
That's
that
a
down and
workbook.
dirty with his stuff. Einstein et al. Is the big, big primer with all of the deep explanations and then illustrations of how consciousness manifests the universe. And that was a beautiful thing about after I did Party of 12 and figured out that Einstein was there, and of course just fell in love. I mean, who doesn't love Einstein? It was amazing. And I thought, we should do just a little book just for Einstein. And so it was 2005, 100-year anniversary of his miracle year, and E = MC squared. And I thought, well, I'll just channel some sessions and see what he has to say. I had no expectation. I had no questions. I just wanted to see what he said. Well, long story short, he channeled a unified field theory, which is something that he didn't do in real life, that includes what he calls the map of human consciousness. And the most profound to this day to me is the scientific, quantifiable definition of compassion with a capital C as the fifth fundamental force of the universe. And he details in great detail how compassion impels energy to create consciousness and then eventually the entire physical universe. So that was pretty heavy. It took me a couple years to like, what? I have to tell the world that the source is in the middle of the planet and we originate in a black hole. And not being a scientist.
Okay. Say that one again. The source is what? What? The source
in the center of the earth.
Is
Originates is where the source originates.
In the center of the earth.
Yes, and it operates like a black hole.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So when we're connecting to planet Earth, as we do, I pretty much do it every meditation everything I ever do with anyone, I'm like taking their energy down to the center of the earth. What you're saying is we're literally connecting to source by doing that.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, and that the energy in the center of the earth, because the earth is spinning so much faster in the center of the planet than it is on the external part of the planet. It's so hot, and it like bores this black hole down through space-time, where consciousness begins its miraculous journey of inspiring energy to step out of nothing and into everything and create one compilation. We call it. So you have a compilation of consciousness. And in that is all of the mathematics that are going to eventually make their way to the surface of the planet where your body is having that experience of the universe there. But it all begins in this compilation. And then, like a compass is an instrument that draws circles. So Einstein, who in life as a child had been fascinated with compasses, says that compassion impels energy to step out of nothing and into the everything and section off this spherical membrane electromagnetic domain that's surrounding all the mathematics that are going to be used. So that's one thing that compassion does. And then, like a compass that aligns stuff to true north, It aligns all of our compilations to true north on the earth, so we're all on the same map. We all have the same legend. And then the third thing it does is it imbues this with the intrinsic knowledge that we're all one being. And that's probably the most classical idea of what compassion is love and connection and empathy. That's part of our makeup, that we know that we are all part of one.
We're all one. Yeah, we're all extensions of source. Compassion, I wrote this down. Compassion, this is what he says. Compassion is the intelligence that uses the fourth fundamental force to impel the creation of the physical world one step at a time. Compassion is the fifth fundamental force of the universe. So when we use the word compassion here, or he uses the word, well, they use the word compassion here, would that be kind of like compassion? Empathy would be another word for it, where you feel what other people are going through rather than sympathy. And you realize that I too have felt like that. I know what that feels like. And because I know what that feels like, I don't want you to feel like that. Would that be?
Yes, but I think we have to think in a bigger sense here, that the part about the construct of our compilation that imbues us with that understanding that we are all one. So that gives us the ability to have that empathy and we are, whether we actually, by the time we make that our way up to the surface and into our physical bodies, what's happening up here might be a whole different thing. Like, people are made of compassion, but they may not be acting in compassion in that smaller C, like you're talking about the empathy. People can be completely uncompassionate, but he's using it in a much bigger sense, in a much more scientific sense, that compassion with the capital C is more like the God energy, that it impels energy to create these circular domains and then line them up to the earth and then imbue them with this and then send this gravitational wave moving up the planet to create the physical world and the lens. So it's sort of bigger than that. It's bigger than just a human emotion and a human experience.
I'm trying to understand it from my understanding of how, because I think I wrote down here, I think I heard you talking on one of your videos, how is matter manifest? Like he talked about, I think we're talking about that. That's
Yes.
saying compassion is how matter manifests. So, when I listen to my mob and other channelers, like the Abraham material, they talk about the energy of emotion. Like you can want something, but if you feel the lack of it, you'll manifest the lack of it rather than the want of it. So it's that energy of emotion that we're talking about, which is the fundamental principle of manifestation. Like attracts like, drawing that energy towards you. Would that come into this?
It does, except it's a little bit different. What we work with is, we call the 3 human dimensions. And these dimensions, this energy exists, you're in the center of the planet with your compilation. Then there's a gravitational wave that literally leaves the center of the planet and makes its way through the earth to then sort of burst into the lens where our bodies are creative bodies, and our bodies are projecting and perceiving all of that mathematics of that universe, a very incredible, complex system of miracles that allows that to happen. So we work with those 3 human dimensions. And I'm working on a piece now. I wrote it years ago, but I'm updating it. It was called Why the Secret Doesn't Work and How to Fix It. And it's this basis of that, what you said about emotion, absolutely, that's the first human dimension right out of the gate. But in our model, emotion is actually, it's kind of the primordial soup. It's the first step from sort of idea of mathematics into particle of this wave. And it's the basis of everything that we have in the physical world. So, and he used to tell us this years ago when they were angels. They say, at the root of that chair, at the root of that light is emotion. And we were like, what? But now I understand it's part of these 3 human dimensions. And as emotion moves up, it creates sound, which becomes intuition, which is the voice of compassion, telling us that next most advantageous step for the good of the whole system. And then it gets into the intellect, which is where all the trouble starts, because intellect has been given the power to make decisions that can say no to emotion.
Absolutely. Yeah, you get the knowing or the gut feeling or the understand, and then your intellect says that can't be right. I guess it's a bit like, so I'm, channeling Einstein, and then the intellect says, that can't be right. That's just my ego speaking or something like that, and can sort of like knock out what you know.
Yes,
But,
and make the decision to not do what intuition is telling you.
Right. Yeah, that's a big one. So I never know how to say your name. I wish you'd say your name world records, because he's there. This person's often been here. Is it possible to have empathy for a person's situation that you have not experienced?
Oh, absolutely. I think.
Yeah, do you want to go into that?
Well, I think part of it is that, first of all, we're all one. So in this life, in this mind, you may not remember having an experience such as, and also we have been gifted with imagination, which is such a powerful, powerful force in our lives that we can direct for good or evil, I suppose. But you see someone, I've never been in a situation like Gaza. I've
Yeah.
never even come close to that. But if I close my eyes and use my imagination to put myself there, you can easily get to a place of empathy. I don't know if we could ever really get to the full force of whatever that terror is that war produces, but we certainly can touch upon that deeply in our hearts.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you say, we're multidimensional beings having experienced lives in many dimensions through time and space. And often people make huge actions based on something they've never experienced, but they have like a memory of having experienced it, maybe from a past life or a future life or something. And so in this life, they've come to remedy that in their own life and take action into helping others, or whatever. Like I was just reading up on a friend of mine called Ronnie Khan, who started a charity down under called Oz Harvest, and she's one of the most successful Australian charities. She's got money just coming out of left, right, and centre. And so she was a Jewish mother that used to put on big feasts for her family, and there was always so much food left over, and she hated putting it in the bin. And so she used to take her leftover food and give it to people who needed it. And this is what Oz Harvest do. It takes food from supermarkets and cafes and restaurants that's all going to go in the bin at the end of the day, but it's still edible. She takes that food and creates feasts for people who need, food for free, people who are in need of food. So, so she's feeding the poor, and yet she's never had that experience in her life. She's been a wealthy sort of, Jewish mother who's never starved, but she's feeding the starving, you know what I mean? So she's got that empathy of something she's not experienced in this life, but maybe she did in another life. But yeah, it's incredible what she's done.
Likely, we bring so much into lives, especially I think in this time period, in this time of conscious awakening, we have an opportunity to be a lot more conscious of those kinds of things than we were maybe in those other lives that we were living then.
Yeah. So I just want to remind people too that you're listening to ATP Media, Accentuating the Positive Awakening Consciousness with Karen Swain on the United Public Radio Network and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network on 107.7 and 105.3 FM, syndicated radio, streaming all over the place. And my guest today is Barbara With, a international peace activist, psychic channel, and we're talking about channeling Albert Einstein and the party, no longer the party of 12, because as my mob said, they've been, there are new people that have come to join the party. It's a party.
It's a party.
They've been, I imagine that they've been so many other identities, like Einstein just wasn't Einstein, even though he's been famous for being Einstein. It'd be interesting to talk to him about his other lives. Have you ever asked him that question? Like,
I have not.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I have not.
Yeah. So he says that this is compassion is the intelligence that uses the fourth fundamental force, and it is the fifth fundamental force. What are the other fundamental forces of the universe?
Well, there's electromagnetics, and I
Mhm.
like to abbreviate that by saying that is the force that ignites things. And then there's gravity, and that's
Okay.
the force that guides things. There's the strong nuclear force, and that's the force that makes things attract and repel.
Mhm.
And then there's a weak nuclear force, which makes things transform. So makes things change from 1 to 2 or from red to green or that kind of. So all of these 4 fundamental forces, allegedly, according to real science, have this influence on energy that then impels all of that to eventually create the physical world. And all Einstein is saying that there's this other great force of the universe that has not been studied yet because people haven't been able to put together how can this force of compassion with the capital C, what does it do? What does it mean? And so he's come out to say, here's what it does. It uses these 4 fundamental forces to impel the creation of the universe one step at a time. And when I present this in my workshops and around the world, I've presented it to thousands of people around the world. I've drawn it real time from nothing, the blank board, to until we have the whole map. And it's absolutely fascinating. And I can find everything on this map, absolutely everything. And after I'm done with this big thing and people come up and stand, they look at it like it's a Mandela of some sort, like, oh, wow, here's Rainbow Bridge, the place where the dogs and the cats go after the thing. And here's this, and here's this. And like, I can explain how our lives actually aren't past, they're concurrent, and how they influence it is that they're bleeding up through us. I can show you how that works technically. So there's just a whole lot that he's delivered that has taken years to unfold and will take more years. Last April, I had the distinct honor of being selected to speak a very tiny, tiny little speaking part, but I was happy at the Science of Consciousness conference in University of Arizona, Tucson, put on by, it's a 30-year anniversary this year was, all these far left brain scientists, the astrophysicists, the nuclear biologists, and they've been looking for 30 years. They've been looking for the answer to how matter is manifest. And when they started, it was a bunch of really far left brain scientists getting together and doing their science stuff. And as they went through the years of studying this, suddenly it was like, wait a minute, now here come the psychologists. Oh, wait a minute, here come the Rumi poets. Oh, wait a minute, here come the afterlife researchers. And so by 30 years, they were open to the idea that I talked to dead people and that I had talked to Einstein and I have this theory, which sounds, just off the cuff to a scientist, sounds pretty ridiculous, but I got such incredible feedback, and I listened to a lot of those left brain scientists, and like a dog, when you're talking to a dog and the dog hears woo 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 woo, walk, woo, treat, food. I could hear, like, I don't know what they're saying, but every now and again they would say something that was like, yes, that's on my map. Yes, that's on my map. And so I left there very, very excited about having got some validation from some actual scientists. I've had amateur scientists in the past always commenting on this, but to have the real thing and have them get excited about it was really exciting for me.
Wow. The Science of Consciousness Conference, it was called, right? And in
Yes.
Tucson, Arizona, you said.
University of
Yeah.
Arizona, Tucson puts it on. I think next year it's in Barcelona.
How many people attend that? Is it well attended?
Oh yeah, it was big. It was very big. We had a huge resort, and it went on for 5 days.
Wow.
Deepak Chopra was one of the
Go
he's
Deepak.
very much involved in the conference through the years, so I got
Uh-huh.
to give him a Imagining Einstein book, and he said he'd read it, but that was really exciting. And yeah, and all kinds of breakout sessions with binaural meditation groups and um, people who studied Jung and just all kinds of stuff that you wouldn't have thought scientists would be into, but
Yeah, it's changing though, isn't it? I mean, everything's changing. Like what has been in the woo-woo closet the doors are open. The doors have been flung open and everything in the woo-woo closet's coming out into the
that's
light of
right.
day.
Thank
And
God.
science, yeah, thank God.
I've been in
10
the
years.
closet a long time.
Science is because we find out stories like people that are revered in the scientific community, like Einstein. We find out just how woo-woo they were, as you know, when they were in their physical bodies, they were like really into the metaphysical and the paranormal, as it's been talked about. You know, you put like, where do you put psychic ability? Do you put that in metaphysical or paranormal closets? You know, like humans just love to label things, don't they, and put them in boxes. And yeah, but the science of consciousness, what was the outcome? Like, what do people come away with when they go to an event like the science of consciousness? Do they just come away with thinking that my intuition is now valid because science is explaining it? How does it work?
You know, I came away with finally science is beginning to catch up.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what the far left brain scientists thought as they're explaining mathematically what my Einstein has explained theoretically. But I think there's a kind of a powerful synergy of when you get people across the spectrum, where it's not just us woo-woo, where
Uh-huh.
it's not just the left brainers,
Yep.
where we're all sitting outside, you know, after all the lectures and having our cocktails and just talking and talking and wow, what an amazing vast range of conversations I was able to have with and these young astrophysicists, these young women who are astrophysicists and biologists and all excited about merging science and spirit. And it was just so exciting to see this is where we've come.
Absolutely. You know, the Arcturians who are a part of my mob have said to me that the thing that humans need to remember or understand is the power of their mental agility, the power of mind, how they manifest, how they create their reality. And there's a lot of people out there, The Secret being one of it, making it a popular subject amongst the mainstream and channelers out there. But yeah, for the most part, we just don't understand how we create. As I said, there we go. We're back. Did you just blip off for a minute there?
I saw you were frozen.
Oh, okay. I was frozen. Yeah.
But you were saying we don't understand how
How
matters manifest.
powerful, how we create our reality. As I said to you, I was watching a documentary on the Prince of Saudi Arabia, trying to get his, you know, like politicians and governments, how they make things happen. They think that it's force. Like, anyway, I won't go into it, but he murdered somebody that was in opposition to him. It's like, I've got to wipe out people that disagree with me. I've got to wipe out people that disagree with me, rather than understanding the fundamental principles of how to create. This is something which humans don't understand, especially the politicians. And what has Einstein or the party said to you about people understanding their powers of creation?
There's a reason why they came to us early and said, this is world peace, one person at a time, starting with self. Because ultimately, especially in this day and age, we can't go at the politicians and expect anything to happen. We can't vote them out anymore the way the systems are set up right now. There is no way for us to go into the lens, into the physical world. And that's not to say that you shouldn't help feed the poor or protest or do any of those things, but ultimately, the power lies within us. And you were talking about The Secret and Abraham Hicks and all this thing about the laws of attraction. Well, I think that our model, which I can actually explain to you how matter is manifest. I think our model, just like Einstein completely revolutionized Newtonian physics when he came out with his stuff. I mean, it just turned the whole world upside down. I think this unified field theory with these maps of human consciousness and conflict revolution, which is the process that we teach people to bring first this alignment within to these three human dimensions that then naturally manifest in our lenses as peace. So, for example, very brief example of a woman comes to my workshop. She's doing conflict revolution. And we ask her where the conflict is. Well, her mother-in-law hates her. Her mother-in-law wants to deport her back to Barbados, where she's from, even though she's living in Norway, married to this man. And so we start the process, and she looks at me and she says, you know how this is going to turn out, don't you? I said, not because I'm a psychic, but it's a simple formula, is that when you get triggered by someone, and we, in conflict revolution, we take that message, what is it, what are they doing? Parboil it down. Well, they don't respect you, or they don't do this or that. And then we revolve it around to ourselves to, first of all, process the emotion so we're not projecting it onto them. And then look at our own lives, because these are our signals to what our work is. So if I'm all kinds of pissed off that, for example, take any war, and certainly in the United States, this whole political parties yelling and screaming at each other, all pointing their fingers, and they're all doing it. But nobody wants to stop and say, wait a minute, what's my party doing? How do we change this here? Mainly because you can't, but you can do it with yourself. And so when my client or the workshop participant, she said, I am so homesick. I miss Barbados. And I said, so why don't you go? Well, I've got these children and my husband. Well, how old are your children? Well, they're 14 and 17. Well, so your intellect is making up a story as to why you can't go back to Barbados, because certainly your children and your husband could live without you. But you can't own it. And so you're projecting it onto your mother-in-law. And as soon as she got that, we call it the Rolodex effect. So it was like flip through the Rolodex, the old days when we had paper, address books on our desks, because we see all of the times that we projected our stuff, and it shifts everything. And she came back the next day, and it was like 25 years of resentment had been lifted. And soon she was going back to Barbados on a regular basis. So this is a microcosm of one person. But if we all, this was because my World Peace Tour is if there's enough people willing to participate, people who understand that as within, so without, and they want to really be that change, I think we have so much power when we do this, and we find that peace within us. And then we can step forward to, what are we going to project? I'm going to project compassion. I'm going to project peace. I might still be feeling anger. I might still be feeling those uncomfortable feelings, but we have a completely revolutionary way to use our breath work, to channel that into the intellectual messages that we fully intend we want to, not the ones that are just knee jerk because we've been taught, you get mad and then you lash out. So it's really a mastery of self. And more and more people certainly are willing, but it's all we can do, one of us at a time, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. All we can do, one of us at a time. Conflict revolution. So your elections are coming up next month, and this two-party system, we've got the same in Australia, has created in the US such conflict amongst people. And you see it on news programs. There's, you just see like everyone's making the other person wrong and calling them idiots. And it's just everywhere in the States, this conflict and making the other wrong. What have the parties said about how this election will impact the collective consciousness? Have they said anything to you about that?
They really haven't said specifically, because I don't generally deal with specifics like elections, but what they have prepared us for many, many years, and especially with conflict revolution, is that there's a huge condition right now of propaganda.
Yeah.
That minds have been subsumed. And I've been studying this really actively since about 2016, when that election happened. And I took a deep dive into that one and found out how much propaganda was being generated and what it was doing to people. But really during COVID, a lot of the people in my world kind of lost their minds. Like they just jumped on the train, and you had to lock everything down and you had to wear the mask. And if you don't take the vaccine, you're killing your grandma. I mean, it was just really intense. And I started to really study what kind of impact does this kind of keeping the truth from you. And you can't really make an informed decision if you can't see the whole big picture. And as I started to write about this, and I'm a journalist as well, I have a Substack, Barbara With, and I started to write about it. I found a man named Matthias Desmet. He's a psychologist in Belgium who wrote a book called The Psychology of Totalitarianism. And it really explains how the mind gets usurped into this propaganda to a point where, much like Nazi Germany did, people were doing things that went very much against their morals, very much against their values, because they were overcome. And so what I learned and what I discovered was, oh my gosh, conflict revolution is the original answer to propaganda, because our minds, our intellects are always telling us you're not good enough, you're not smart enough. They're saying no to our intuition, and they have the whole control. And so conflict revolution really realigns everything and puts the intellect in its proper operating piece of the operating system, rather than having control of everything, and aligns us to compassion so that we can make decisions based on our own intuition, which is ultimately the goal, is to learn how to be intuition driven.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was having a conversation recently. I was out with a couple of friends, and we got talking about world affairs and stuff, and listening to their decisions about who they are and how the world works was a complete carbon copy of what the MS media, mainstream media, puts out. But the way they speak, and I've had this conversation with my brother too, it's like they're really informed and they've made this decision and it's their choice. They haven't been submitted to information coming at them that has convinced them at all. It's like, no, I've made this choice. It's really interesting to watch, Barbara, how people have points of view, and again, which goes against their intuitive process, because these people are loving, kind, beautiful people. but then they have these points of view, which is a carbon copy of what the MS media puts out. But they think that it's them speaking, like this is like, I've made this decision, this is my choice to think like this. It just looks like hypnosis to me.
Yes,
It really does.
hypnosis. And then what I'm finding in this, because I'm not left or right. I mean, I grew up a Democrat, but I became somebody who was very, very independent, is seeing these loving people, dear friends for a long time, suddenly switch like that, like a switch flips. And in this case, in these years, it's been about Trump. You know, you say the word Trump, and suddenly people are seething, and they've just become these rancorous, nasty, name-calling people, and then it sort of subsides, almost like the movie Alien, you know, when the alien came out of their chest and came back. And I to this day, this is a lot of what I deal with in my Substack is I am working to see, I'm not going to give up, that there's a way of communicating with enough forethought and enough of my own triggers under control, so I'm not, you know, hooking into it, to be able to to drop some seeds in there. And I don't know. It's so fascinating to me. And why some people and not everyone.
It is fascinating. And AWR has this question: what drives behavior? Sending good vibes to all right now. Thanks for your good vibes, Sterling.
We need all those good vibes. That is sure.
Send your good vibes. Send your good vibes. Yeah. So what drives behavior? It's a great question.
I think it's a combination, frankly, of when we're looking at these three human dimensions, and there's this sort of gravitational wave coming up, and emotion, all emotion is in our solar plexus, this huge primordial soup of our direct connection to source. That's what emotion is. And then it moves up and it moves into this sound, the voice of compassion, impelling us always. And this part of our system is perfect. It's always perfect. Intuition, well, God is never going to lead us astray. It's when we get into the intellect that the emotion marries itself to the thoughts. And pretty soon, you don't know that you have these two different dimensions. It just seems like, well, I'm feeling all these things, but you're thinking about it. You're divining it. You're judging it. You're constructing it. And then that's what gets projected. And so I think that's on an instinctual or a primordial way of what drives behavior. But we have the power to step outside of all of that, to cultivate what we call a witness, which I'm sure is very common for everyone, that term, to be able to witness ourselves. And I think what you see when you see the whole unified field presented is the proof of the theory in depth of why this works, why this is valid. So we step outside ourselves, and then we can observe, what are we thinking? What are we feeling? What is intuition telling us? And we can make informed choices. Now, it's not easy, because that intellect has been in power for a long time and doesn't want to give it up. And that's what you're seeing, I think, as the reflection outside us in the political systems. People don't want to give up their power, but to make the shift where we are all going to be aligned to compassion, ego's got to give up a certain amount of power and understand, if it doesn't come to live in alignment to compassion, I'm not sure the species at this point will survive.
Absolutely. I'd like to say, Desley says she's loving this chat. What are you saying here, Desley? The education system does not encourage free.
Oh my gosh. That is an understatement, Desley.
I think that for most people, what drives behavior is desire, what it is that you think you want. And,
emotion.
And most people don't understand what that is. And with everything, I think that if your desire is that you want peace more than anything else, that, like instead of the desire to be right, or the desire to be loved or appreciated or heard, a lot of our desires come from our wounds like I need to be respected. You're not respecting me. I'm going to make you respect me. You know, like that
Right.
desire. And maybe our fundamental desire was the desire for peace. I put on a big Peace Day event in 2014. We hired out a big pavilion here in Sydney and had a great time. So it was International Peace Day, 21st of September. And I remember thinking on that morning, no matter what happens today, I'm going to be in peace. And I can't tell you, Barbara, how many things went wrong that day. But something happened that was really interesting. Even though I was one of the founders of this Peace Day event, the person in charge of the walkie-talkies, where we could all talk to each other, because it was a big event, hundreds, 1,000 people there, needed to talk to each other about things. She didn't give me a walkie-talkie. She was in her ego, and I got upset about it for a second, and I'm like, let it go. I don't have a walkie-talkie, so I can't talk to everyone. That's fine. So all the dramas that happened that day, I didn't know about because I didn't have the walkie-talkie.
See, I'm going to be in peace.
And I had the best day.
Leave the walkie-talkie.
I was in peace all day. And at the end of the day, when I spoke to everybody else, they were like, oh, the parking problems and these people didn't turn up and the security guards and this and the ticketing. And there was drama happening all day. And they were not in peace, but I was. But I made a decision. I'm going to be in peace. It's my fundamental achievement to be in peace. Yeah, if that is the decision we make every day. Imagine our behavior. Imagine what if that drove our behavior.
Exactly.
Imagine.
Exactly. And we always have this saying, speaking, do you want to be right or do you want to make peace? Because these are two decidedly different skills. And sometimes I think there's times where there are times when you do need to be right. Like if you're in an emergency situation and somebody's saying, you can see they're bleeding out and they're like, no, I'm okay. And sometimes you have to be right. But in this, especially in these wars that we're fighting, especially in this whole political scene that's going on, it's people driven by the desire to have to be right. And what's so interesting is with conflict resolution, when we're all triggered by somebody not respecting us and we stop and go, okay, where is my ego not respecting my intuition? Where is my intuition telling me don't go with that person? And my ego is saying, oh, I can't do that. They're going to think I'm not very friendly. And then I'm going to have to, then so you go and then you have a terrible time and then you blame them for being something when in reality, it's us. It's us making those decisions. And it's an intricate, intimate study of self. But what else do we have these days? Really?
Yeah. Yes. I think that what you hit the nail on the head there. It's that desire to want to be accepted and liked. That can, like a lot of people can go astray. And rather than speaking your truth and coming from your gut instinct, it's like maybe they won't understand. I don't know. What do you want to say about that? That desire to want to be accepted and liked.
It
can create a lot.
I'm sorry, it stems from our own need for self-love. Our own need to learn, which you didn't, and I didn't, and I bet anybody out there didn't, how to really take care of our needs, starting with this incredible emotional dimension that we have that's not supposed to be controlled. It's supposed to be regulated, but you don't get up in the morning and go, you know what, I think I'll do some joy from 10 to 12, and then I'll work a little anger in the afternoon. It's flowing. It's our voice of God coming up. And how are we going to process it? Because when it flows up and gets caught in our intellect and we project, now we're not the peacemakers.
I love that. Can you just say that again? I'm going to do joy from 10 to 12, and then I'll throw a bit of anger in
a little anger in the afternoon, and hopefully do some sedation.
Okay, I'd like to get practical here with people that are having conflict. Maybe they've got conflict over what terrorism is doing across the world. Maybe they're having conflict in their relationship. Maybe they're having conflict with their kids or family members. What's the first step that they can take to resolving this conflict within themselves?
Okay, the first step is to commit to the mystery. Is that if you're going to come into the conflict resolution process with us, we're going to start by saying what we're taking you through is a revolutionary way of looking at things. And it might be a mystery in the beginning as you suspend how you used to operate or how you're habitually operating. And there's two things, and this is just the basics 101. One is you have emotion, you have intellect. These are like your stomach and your heart. And if your heart is hurting, you do one thing. If your stomach needs help, you do another. So emotion and intellect have their own purpose, their own way that you bring them into alignment. And emotion is processed through breath work, not thinking, not analyzing. Of course, we all do that. And of course, it helps in sometimes. But ultimately, when we're triggered by an emotion, the first thing that should hit us is our breath, not our thinking. It should be, okay, let's get this emotion up and let's get intuition informed so it can guide us. And then there's the other one, which is intellect. And that's a whole different, and you all know this when you're trying to reduce the fluctuations of thinking, you do meditation, you do all kinds of things to quiet that mind. But maybe one of the most important things I think in this work, and one of the hardest things, is that when I get triggered by someone and I have to tell myself, okay, what is it? Well, she's so controlling. All right, there's your work. Now, it doesn't mean that she's not controlling. It means my domain is my responsibility. I don't have any power over her domain. So I'm going to revolve my focus back and start to really get in that witness and pay attention to where am I doing what I perceive outside myself? And then you set about to actually watch yourself. Because I guarantee you, your intellect will tell you that you're one thing, but you will observe yourself 9 times out of 10 being another thing. And then it'll be like, oh, dang, look at me not respecting myself. Look at me saying yes when I should say no. Look at me projecting. And then we start to really have this self-mastery. And this inside, this work, this is the work of world peace. It may not be like, you may not directly think of it heading over to Gaza or Ukraine or Congo or wherever all the conflicts are, but this is where it starts. It has to start here. It can't not start here. So don't underestimate how important this work is.
Radical responsibility.
Exactly. Yes, I love that.
For every judgment I serve to another, where am I feeling and behaving the same way? Yeah, where am I believing the same thing? I was having a quick chat to my brother yesterday, who's in a new-ish relationship, and things are sort of going pear-shaped. And the question in my mind was, he's a strategist, and he has a job which is all about intelligence, so he's in his head. And something I said to him yesterday, I said, you know what? You're a problem solver. And relationships, although they reflect the distortion within yourself, like where you're out of alignment with peace and love within yourself, they're ultimately not a problem to be solved. And he looked at me like, really? It's
revolutionary.
I said, yeah. I said, your girlfriend is not a problem that you need to solve. Like, because he goes into, and this is what we all do, you know, when you see behavior in the other that you don't agree with, and you've got to fix it, you've got to solve it, you know, it's, you project it out like, you said this to me, you made me feel like this, you, like we're projecting it all out onto the other instead of taking that radical responsibility. How am I creating this in my life? What is it in me that's making this happen? Yeah.
Imagine if our leaders were like that.
Imagine.
It will be a new world when that happens. So let's start with us.
Yeah. Enlightened leadership. Yeah, imagine. Yeah. I mean, it can only start with us. Critical mass, right, Barbara? It's like when more and more people light up and understand who they are as powerful creators, then the guides have said to me it takes less than 5% to
Yes.
create the collective, to affect the collective. So I think about that and I'm like, less than 5%. And although there are a lot of people talking about consciousness and talking about enlightenment and sitting at the foot of the guru and meditating and doing the mushroom and the ayahuasca journeys and, you know, and everything that, you know, the yoga and breath work, there's not a lot of people living like that, like living in that connection to peace, pure positive energy. Because if there were over 5%, then we'd live in a different world.
Well, I have this theory, and it's just my personal theory, and that is that we would, if it wasn't for this incredible mass of uprising of compassion in people that you and I are helping to bring along and that people are doing, that we wouldn't be here. I think the
Yeah.
fact that we're all still on the planet and having these conversations is the best sign that we've diverted a lot of things that could very well have done us in. And I think that because all of these people, all of the compassion, whether you're consciously doing like what you and I do, or if you're just a person who has compassion and is doing good in the world without thinking that it's your, spiritual duty, you're just drawn to that. We're connecting all that. And you don't see it on the news and you don't see it on social media. And I see it, however, I've probably been on about 80 podcasts in this past year that I've done my first year of my World Peace Tour. And I've got to talk to many, many, many people around the world and so many young people who are just boom, 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 boom. They're getting it. They get it like in a way that I didn't get it when I was their age. So I have so much hope um, I'm accentuating the positive that we are still here and we're talking and we're communing and we're learning from each other. Every conversation we have elevates us to that critical mass.
Yeah. Yeah, as you know, I've been doing this. You've been doing this for a long time. I've been doing this for a long time and talking to New World teachers for over 25 years and watching. And I'm always amazed when I discover a new one. I always think to myself, how come I didn't know about her? Like when I discovered you, I'm like, wow, you're doing amazing work in the world. How come I didn't know about you before this? I'm always amazed, and it makes me think there are just so many people out there doing this work and helping humanity
Exactly.
rise. There's so many. And in 25 years, I've probably not even scratched the surface of the amount of people that are out there doing this work on this level too. I mean, I call them the light workers, and the light workers are like the nurses and the people that are in service jobs and they're using their compassion to serve humanity. And then there are the light weavers, where we're weaving the matrix into a new reality. And they're the people working with mind and consciousness and the people I call the New World teachers. Even if you don't even call yourself a teacher, but you shift the minds of people around you to think in a way that's more peaceful or more open or more enlightened. And then you're a light weaver, weaving a new
Beautiful.
story.
Yeah.
That's just, I can't even imagine how many. The guides have said to me, millions upon millions upon millions were sent to Earth to help in the shift in consciousness on planet Earth.
And we're a network of synergy being not only regeneration through human will and divine grace, but when we bring our energies together, it multiplies in ways that two people can't do alone.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's an exciting time to be on Earth. It's a challenging time, but it's an exciting time. I don't know. What do some people say? You can get dumped by the wave or you can ride the wave. which is your choice. I live on the beach. I get dumped by waves quite often. It's not fun.
Yes, I do too. I live in Lake Superior, so I know about waves. But I do know lately, especially, the waves for me have been the waves for me have always been dramatic, like big waves, but never before in my life have I been so excited about being able to deal with anything. Like, it's not like, "Oh, please make only the good things happen." It's like I get up in the day, it's like, "Okay, here we go." What's the world gonna throw at me? And sometimes I do end up in bed in tears and taking a nap in the afternoon because it's all too much. But that's what we're here for. We're here to
Yeah.
live our fullest, most passionate, most exciting, and I think spiritual life that we can possibly do while we're human.
Yeah.
So our perfect imperfections in the end are only gonna be our learning tools. So
Yeah.
I'm very excited, very excited.
I know, and even all the crazy things that are happening on the planet at the moment, like this year has been the year of weather. We've just watched 2 hurricanes devastate Florida. And it could be devastating, but at the same time, what does it take to make people really change? And when people are in that devastation, they come together in unity like they've never come together before. Like, does it have to take such huge drama to make us come together and work together in a unified, peaceful way? But at the same time, I guess it does, because it's happening. Yeah. So the conflicts, create the desires for something new, something else, something different. And how much can we take? How much of the conflict can we take before we actually change, before we really change? You're on a world tour. Where have you been and where are you going? Are you still on the world tour?
Yeah, a year ago, I decided that it was time after all of these years of doing this incredible work that I devote the rest of my life to it. I'll be 70 in February,
Oh,
so
wow.
it's not a long stretch. Well, my parents both live to be in their 90s, so maybe I've got many years ahead. But I just thought, the world's in such a place, and I have this incredible body of knowledge and really, really been gifted with a lot of talents, especially for speaking and channeling. And so I left home last year on October 15th. I rented out my home and I traveled and I made it over to the UK. I spent most of the winter pet sitting across the UK as a way to support the trip. And then I just had conversations. I went to spiritualist churches. I went to uh, also, I was in Paris. I was in Belgium. I was in Romania
Wow.
and went to a lot of peace gatherings there. And I ended up coming back to the United States and going to the Tucson conference and then up through the United States. So I put on it turned out to be about 28,000 miles between my Europe and all across the United States that I went, in 7 countries and something like 18 dogs. And got to meet just the most wonderful people. I got to be in London for a really important Julian Assange rally, and that
Wow.
he's been I've been a big supporter of Julian Assange for as long as I've known of him, for
Was
15
that
years.
rally before or after he was let out?
Before. It was
Okay.
his appeal hearing,
Uh-huh.
and
Uh-huh.
I got to march behind his father and his wife, just right behind him. And so many things on this tour and so many people that I met and so many conversations. And then I came back in May to my island to spend my summer regrounding, and this is the most beautiful, beautiful place for that. And this year I'm leaving on November 1st, and I have a stop in Minneapolis where I have a speaking engagement. I'm down to Madison, and I'm going down to Georgia where I'll base camp out of the winter and hope to get over to Oslo. I do a lot of work. I've done a lot of work in Norway through the years. Back to Romania. I want to get to Barcelona to the Science of Consciousness conference, and I've been invited, and I like to leave it just open to where I'm called by spirit. And
Yeah.
if anybody wants to host me, uh, I travel.
You're open to being hosted.
I'm
So
very open.
the science of consciousness is in Barcelona, what, in 2025, is it?
Yes, I think in
Okay,
April.
so So it changes countries. It was in the States this year, and it'll be
Every
in
other year,
Spain.
it's in Tucson, and then the next year, it's somewhere exotic.
Oh, okay. That's
Yeah,
pretty cool.
yeah,
That's very cool. Wow. Yeah, I'll have to check that out, The Science of Consciousness. I haven't
yeah.
heard of that one. But it's I think I asked you before, is it big? So do thousands of people go to that, or is it just hundreds?
I bet there was 1,200 people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, amazing. And so you're going to come down under?
I would love to come down under.
What stops you?
Timing, I guess,
Distance? Yeah, timing.
and,
Yeah.
connections and purpose. I've got a couple of podcasts I've been on who have said, "Please come to Australia." So I'm getting more invitations to various
More
places around
more
the
connect
world.
more connections down under. What about Canada? Have you been up to Canada to
Yes, I have.
present workshops and stuff?
Yes,
Mhm.
I did it, I did quite a bit of work in the Toronto area and Vancouver Island. We did some stuff over there, and, um,
Nice.
yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. So we've got about 10 minutes left to go. We didn't do any channeling today. Do when you channel the party, is it a process, or are they just always there with you? How does that work with you, Barbara?
Well, they're kind of always there with me. I have
Always
a
there.
really great regulation system that I've developed through the years when, as you know, through our training program, we learn how not to get overwhelmed. We learn how, you know, they can ask us to do things, but ultimately we get to say, as we say in the psychic sorority, we get to say who, we get to say when, and we get to say how much.
So when you speak to your mob, your team, your party, do you ask them questions, or is it more them informing you and speaking through you?
When I do a reading, it's generally starts out with what we call the dissertation. And that's where I invite people just to either, if you're a note taker, you can take notes because I know some people just love to take notes while they're listening. Or you can sit back and, as we say, like a empty rice bowl, empty your mind and prepare to receive because it's a lot of information and it's not meant to be all absorbed in one sitting. It's time released. And then there comes a time where they open for questions and conversation, and anything can be asked, personal or global or anything at all. And it's never failed to be really insightful and uh, always offering, like you think Einstein would, just really brilliant new perspectives on things.
And what's been the most profound thing that you've identified that has come through? Maybe we've spoken about it already.
I think it's the fifth fundamental force. I think that
Mhm.
has taken compassion and created a scientific, quantifiable definition. It's not just an esoteric idea. It's a quantifiable definition of how compassion impels energy to create the universe, and that I can explain to you that in my sleep now, after all these years, is just stunning to me. I just am so honored, and people ask me, well, why you? Why you? Well, did Barbara Walters ask? Why me? Why do I get to talk to all the famous people? Who knows? Maybe she did. I don't know. I volunteered and was chosen, but I'm just really, really honored to have that
Well,
that
it
gift.
sounds like, we as humans put people up that are famous, whether they're famous for being Marilyn Monroe or Albert Einstein, we put them up on, but when you talk to them in spirit, well, when you talk to them in person, the fame thing isn't a complete illusion. It's
Yeah,
a complete illusion.
you
We're
know,
all
Di-
just the one
Diana said.
source. Yeah.
Diana said in her interview, she said she was trying to explain to people how don't idolize stars because we're all
Right.
stars in heaven. We're all
Right.
stars.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think that people that have that platform, that stage, Diana's story is so beautiful because maybe it started off as a little girl who wanted to be a princess and marry a prince. Maybe that's what her desire started. But she soon realized when everything went pear-shaped that she had a bigger mission in life than to be married to the Prince of England. And that was to open the hearts of humanity. Like, she got that before she died. Like, her traumas and her bulimia and her mental problems was all about feeling one with, like everybody else that has mental problems and self-worth problems, and opening the hearts. What did she say? Someone's got to love them. Someone's got to do it. So she realized that her platform, she was there for a reason. One of my first channeling experiences was talking to a really famous Hollywood actress. And I won't say who. I keep her name. I'll tell you after. But I keep it private because I know that when you're on the world stage, that personal, you don't want to be talked about like that. Not that she would mind. I'm sure she wouldn't mind me talking about it publicly. But and it was really interesting to have this channeling experience and to sort of, and what they were saying about her, like why she was who she was and why she was born into that family and why she had that platform, and that she was here to utilize that world stage to like bring her consciousness and her spiritual journey to a bigger public, because she was still at that stage, because this is years ago when I was in my 20s, she was still like carving out the career to be the actress and chasing the dream of the actress and everything. And they were just sharing with her that that platform that she had was for a bigger purpose than the next best movie. The next, it was interesting for me because I was like hearing the message and saying the message at the same time, and realizing that when you have that world stage, that big platform, it can be for a greater purpose than just to be revered as a great pop singer or actress or scientist or whatever. Darling one, we've got 4 minutes to go. Thank you so much for being on the show. You are awesome. Just tell people where they can find you.
If you come to barbarawith.com, BARBARAWITH.com, and I've got a meditation class that's coming up here for 8 weeks. We're going to do some really deep dives into that. I've got a how to channel class that's coming up in January. I'm very excited about teaching this. I haven't taught this in a while. And also, if any of your listeners are interested in a reading, I'd be happy to extend an hour reading for the cost of a half hour. If you'd like to have that, come on over and sign up and get one. And to you too, Karen, although you don't need it. But your mob can mob my party.
Yeah. I rarely have readings. Well, I never actually have readings.
Yeah,
I never have any questions to ask. I remember standing in front of a great healer who has been, damned. But anyway, and somebody said, "Do you have any questions?" And I said, "No." And they said, "Well, what if you're standing in front of God. What do you want to ask God?" I said, "I've got the connection to God like everybody else has. I don't need somebody else outside myself." But yeah, a lot of people feel like they do, especially when you're in your drama, like how to find that peace, that conflict, resolution. Because when you're in, what does Byron Katie say? When you believe your stressful thoughts, you're in your insanity. Like, you're just insane. So sometimes when we're in our insanity, we need some people to knock us out of it, slap us in the face and knock us out of our insanity. Dying One, it's been so beautiful to chat with you. Thank you so much for being on the show. And thanks for everybody that's been listening and tuning in. Thanks for your comments. The beautiful Shirley from Canada has been here. Desley from Australia. Lots of wonderful people. We've got Russian Asat on Rumble. Don't know where you're from. Yeah, lots of beautiful people tuning in. Thank you so much. And we will, what have we got left? We've got always navigating this time difference. We will catch you on the next one. Thanks again, Barbara.
Thank you all.
Stay online and I'll tell you who that Hollywood actress was.
Okay, bye everybody.
Bye for now.